Everyone's saying the market is finally turning, and this may be the opportunity that homebuyers and renters have been waiting years for. And honestly, it felt like this time may never come. But based on what the numbers have been showing us so far for the past couple of months and where we are at this point up until this year, this may be your chance. So on this episode, I'm breaking down what the recent data has been showing us and whether or not this is the time for you to dive in and start getting ready to buy that home. Or if you should wait out just a little bit longer and say, okay, this year may not be it for me, but 2026, that's going to be it. So let's get into it. And we'll be back in 3, 2, 1. We gone. Welcome back, family, to another episode of the First Sip Podcast. I'm your host, Dekimbe Smith, and this week, as I sip on my good old ginger tea, I'm here to break down what's been going on in the housing market. And, every couple of months, I like to come back and give you guys an update on what's been going on, break down some of the numbers, not dive too much into it, not get into all the nitty gritty, but give you a better understanding of what's really going on so you can make an educated decision and know, okay, whether or not this is the time for you to buy. Is it a time for you to sell? Should you be looking at investments? What should you be doing? What's really going on in the market beyond the headlines, right? Beyond the feud between Jerome Powell and Donald Trump, beyond the interest rates that seem to never drop and the high home prices, right? But are things really changing? So like I said, that's what I wanted to get into this week. So let's get into it, starting off with the issue that we've been dealing with well over the past 10 years now, which is inventory. Now, a recent report came out from Realtor.com that showed that we've had a 30% increase year over year in the amount of inventory that's currently on market. Now, basically what that means is that the homes that are for sale have been sitting longer over time, right? So a combination of homes that are being put up for sale within, let's say, this month, combined with homes that are sitting from the past couple of months, right? You put those together, that makes up the overall active listings that are still sitting there, right? Now, there might also be some pending sales that go into that, but overall, we're seeing more homes sitting on market for a longer time. And when you're looking at that, that starts giving more leverage to home buyers because home sellers are going to be put in a position now where they're saying, okay, well, my home's sitting here a little bit longer. What are some things that I need to do to start attracting buyers? Is it because my home isn't priced appropriately, or is it because buyers now have more options? Like we're saying, if there's more inventory on the market, it's not like how it was back in 2021, 2022, when it was 100% a seller's market, right? Where they were able to put something up and say, okay, I'm going to put this up at a high price and know that it's going to be a bidding war where I may be able to make an extra 10, 15, 20,000, 50,000, depending on where you are, on the listing, right? And these are things where, fast forward to where we are now, it's not the same market, right? Here we are, 2025. Currently, at the time of recording this, we're June 2025, and we are seeing that, okay, sellers are starting to have to get a little bit more strategic, right? You can't just copy and paste and throw it up there like the last house that went up down the road and expect it to sell for the same time, within the same time, or for the same amount, right? You got to be a little more strategic because buyers, like I said, do have options, and they're going to be shopping around and making the best choice, especially as buyers start being put into a position where they know, okay, they got to be a little tighter with how they're spending their money. The economy is shaky across the board, whether that be from people losing their jobs to, increase in prices from inflation, tariffs, different things going on in the economy. There's a lot of things that are hurting people on the buyer side, where beyond home buying, right, these are things that they have to consider before they even get ready to start buying a home. So now that they're looking at these things, they're starting to wait a little bit longer and say, okay, let me start considering different options. Okay, maybe we're not going to go for that house, but this other house that's been sitting there now for well over a month, maybe we can go talk to them and see what they're willing to negotiate, right? So those are some things that we're seeing just from an inventory standpoint. But inventory still isn't where it needs to be, right? We're still about 16% short from where we were back in the 2019, 2017 range, where things were a little bit more balanced out, as people would say, right? And it was a little bit more affordable. But that still, like I said, brings us to the whole problem of pricing and affordability, because until we get that inventory back up where it needs to be, pricing and affordability is going to be an issue. Now, as far as pricing goes, the median home price right now in America is still sitting right around $430,000. Now, when I say median, right, you got to take in everything from the cheapest home that you can find in the city here in America all the way up to the $1 million listings, right? So it's a big range, and that's where you're going to fall somewhere in the middle and find that 430,000. But for the majority of people, that still isn't an affordable thing that many people can say, okay, yeah, I can go ahead and, just qualify for a loan and go ahead and do that. I was reading another stat just the other day that said since 2019, the average home buyer needs to earn $45,000 more to be able for the home to be quote unquote affordable. And when you're looking at that, it's like, okay, well, unless you've been doing a good job getting your salary increases over the last 4 or 5 years, many people probably haven't increased their salary by $45,000. And that leaves you in a position asking yourself, well, what are they to do? And like I said, like I like to talk about on here, that's where you got to get strategic. You got to start saying, okay, what are the options in my area? What are some things that I'm seeing sitting on the market longer? Like I was talking about a few minutes ago when it comes to inventory, and where can I really start negotiating and find some leverage? Because I don't know where I'm going to find an extra 45,000 right now. So what is my way into the market, right? And so that's why I say pricing has to be a big part of the conversation right now. When you are talking to home sellers, if you are a buyer who's looking there in the market, look for those price reductions, right? Like I said, within the past, the last month, we saw price reductions on about 20% of the listings. I think it was like 18%, but somewhere between 18 to 20% of the overall listings had a price reduction. And a lot of these were coming up in some of the hottest markets around the country, right? This was down in Texas, over in Florida, right? I think the top 5 that had price reductions were just split between Texas and Florida and California. And I bring this up because these were places back during the pandemic where you saw some of the fastest home price increases, right? When everybody's seeing the numbers just starting to go through the roof, these were a lot of the places where they were having these bidding wars because a lot of people were either moving there or moving from there. So there was a lot of stuff going on where there was a lot of action, right? A lot of money going around, a lot of activity going. So fast forward, things are starting to slow down. People are getting tighter on their budgets. People who had properties down there who might have had loans now, they might have had balloon payments on some of those loans, and those are now being called in the next year or two, and they're now having to sell their properties because they're saying, I can't manage this, so I got to get this off my hand. And this is where you're starting to see, like I said, more inventory, more options for home buyers, and more adjustments to those prices in some of the toughest areas across the country. But pricing, right? The price that you see on the listing is just one thing. Another thing we really have to consider when we're talking about these things is the actual mortgage rate that goes with these homes, right? These homes that you're buying. And like I was just saying, for some of these investors, people who bought homes during the pandemic, they may have had loans that are going to get adjusted now in the next year or two. And that 3% may go ahead and blow up to 7, 8, 9%, depending on the terms that they're able to go ahead and renegotiate for. But like I said, that's just for the investor side. Going back to the homeowners, or the home buyers, I should say, if you're a home buyer who's been looking at the mortgage rates the last couple of years, that thing hasn't budged, right? From the low 6s all to where we're at now, right about like 6.9, 7%. The thing just seems to not be dropping to where some people hope it would, which I know I talk to people all the time about this. A lot of people are hoping to one day again see that 3 or 4% interest rate. And I'm the first person to always tell them that if that ever happens, then we're going to be in the middle of another global pandemic, another crazy like black swan event where the world is in a crisis, and we got to start sitting there asking ourselves, okay, like we're probably going to have some other concerns other than whether or not we, want to be buying a home. But that's a whole conversation for another time, right? So when I say being realistic about the mortgage rates and things like that, looking and saying, okay, is there going to be a 0.5% rate cut this year? Am I expecting anything to drop back down to 6.5, 6.3, 6.2%? And being able to strike at that point and then saying, okay, what does my strategy look like over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years to then, refinance that loan? Maybe this isn't my long-term house that I'm going to be in. Maybe this is just a starter home, right? That's a part of the conversation people don't really have a lot of when they're talking about, okay, well, you're looking at the interest rate. Well, how long are you planning on being there? Right? The average homeowner, I believe, lives in their home for about 7 years before they go ahead and make a decision on what they want to do next. And this is because of a whole bunch of different reasons, right? It could be different life events. Maybe you got a new job in a new place. Maybe you're having, maybe your family's expanding and you need another room. You have other places, you have other priorities that pop up as life goes on, and you just don't know when you sit there and buy your home the first time. And that's something, like I said, we have to consider when we're looking at things like the mortgage rate, the home price. What is your overall plan right now in life? What is your strategy, and how can we kind of put all these things together to really come up with a blueprint, something that you can really follow and say, okay, this is what I'll do here, but if this happens within the next year, the next 2 years, then I'll pivot and make this adjustment because this opportunity now came up, right? So keep yourself open to some options. But that's where I also tell people too, right? Keeping yourself open to options has to be really considered when it comes to where you're going to be living. I mean, I know I've told this story before, but I come from a family where my parents, my grandmother, they came over to this country from Guyana because of what needed to be done, right? The lifestyle that they wanted to live, the way that they wanted to be able to raise their kids. They said, okay, you know what, we may have to make a pivot and move, right? Whether that be from Guyana to New York or from New York to the Poconos in the middle of the woods, when I was scratching my head and saying, guys, why are we moving out here? All of our families, still there in New York and Brooklyn. Why don't we just stay here? Well, now that I'm older, I come to understand that, okay, my parents, my dad's, he saw an opportunity, right? They sat down, they talked about it, and they said, okay, this is going to be a better lifestyle. This is going to be more affordable, more cost effective than us going and buying something in Long Island. And like I said, that's my simple, that's a simple story of how I look at the things that I don't hear a lot of conversations with now from people, right? Where it's like, okay, the home prices, the rental prices in your neighborhood, in your area might be a little tough, but what happens if I need to move 15 minutes outside of where I'm at right now, maybe 30 minutes down where I'm at, maybe an hour, right? Maybe an hour and a half, maybe something that's reasonable, right? I'm not telling you to move 5 hours, 10 hours away, to somewhere that that you don't nobody. But let's think of some other reasonable ways where we can start making home ownership, making, renting an apartment affordable for ourselves, because these are things, like I said, that'll help us being able to continue to build towards those other life events, those other life stages. But if we just put ourselves stuck in the mud with these high, mortgage payments, these high rental payments, how do we ever get there, right? And that's something I've always tried to keep in mind, because I've heard it from plenty of people when I was at the bank who were already investing in real estate, who already own homes, who told me, they said, hey man, live below your means for as long as possible and just watch how much easier it is for you to do what it is you want to do. And I am taking that mantra that they have always given me, and I am running with it, because like I said, there are things that are happening with the economy overall all around us, whether it be with the housing market, with the stock market, geopolitics, everything, right? And one thing I'm realizing is that you need to be prepared for when opportunity does arise. Like I said, I'm going to keep bringing you the information so you can ask yourself, okay, is this a good time for me to dive in and start pursuing home ownership, or should I continue to save up my money because it doesn't look like much has changed? And like I said, just a quick little recap of what we went over today, right? Mortgage rates have not really changed much over the past couple of months, over the past year. If anything, we're back at a higher level like we were, middle of last year, right around like March of last year. Things are tough again. And with the impact of tariffs and the overall economy, with things, like I said, the president has a lot of plans that he's implementing right now or trying to get implemented. And it's making things uncertain when it comes to decisions that the Fed wants to make for cutting rates. So they're not in a hurry to cut those when it comes to the home prices and the listings that we're seeing. Inventory is up, but at the same time, home prices aren't being cut all the way across the board. Now, in some of the fastest growing markets that we've seen over the past couple of years, yes, you're definitely seeing reductions across the board in those places. But some of the places like right here in Philadelphia, is still pretty balanced, right? And sellers kind of do still have some wiggle room, but buyers also have some wiggle room as well, right? So like I said, it's all about how you're going to negotiate. And if you ever have questions about, okay, Dekimbe, what does that really look like? What are some things that I should be asking? If you're here and you're looking to buy in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, reach out to me, right? Because these are things that we can sit down and find a time to talk about, and we can help you build a strategy, get you the financing you need, and we can work together to get you towards home ownership, to work towards getting you into your next rental, to get you towards home ownership, or whatever it is that you want to do financially, right? Let me know. My information's in the bio. And let me know what you guys are seeing in your area. Are homes sitting on the market longer? Are prices starting to cut down? As you drive down the road, are you seeing more homes for sale? Are you seeing less homes for sale? What are your neighbors saying? Let me know. I want to keep the conversation going. And until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and as always, enjoy your first sip.